Have you ever been staring down a major deadline, a moment when you absolutely know you should be focused, but instead you find yourself completely absorbed in some random low-stakes task?
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe it's, I don't know, meticulously organizing your spice rack or watching some questionable documentary about competitive bird watching.
It's that universal self-inflicted wound, isn't it?
Mhm.
Whether it's that procrastination or biting your nails until they bleed, or even walking away from a really promising relationship just before they have a chance to reject you.
And these actions, they feel so profoundly irrational and genuinely self-destructive. You're just sitting there thinking, why do I keep doing this to myself?
We always frame it as a character flaw, right? A lack of willpower.
Yeah, I'm just lazy.
Exactly. But here's the really counterintuitive reveal that jumps out from our sources today. These behaviors,
Mm.
they may not be irrational at all.
Not irrational.
No, they are often rooted in deep evolutionary survival instincts. They're designed to function as a shield, not just as simple self-destruction.
Wow. Okay, so that's the critical paradox we're diving into today.
That's our mission. We're going to unpack this hidden logic behind your resistance.
Mm.
We'll start with the surprising psychological roots drawing on some of Dr. Charlie Harriet Maitland's work, which frames this self-sabotage as, a survival mechanism.
And then from there, we'll move into the more formal academic world.
Right, to define the framework of what's called self-handicapping.
And finally, we're going to look at a really potent modern trap, especially for highly curious people, like you, our listener, the tendency to over-intellectualize as a way to avoid taking any meaningful action.
The goal here is to give you clarity on the why behind those self-defeating behaviors and to provide some concepts for moving forward that don't just rely on, trying harder.
So where do we start?
Let's start with the fundamental premise because this context, it really shifts everything about how you interpret your own behaviors.
Okay, let's unpack this core idea then. The brain is not your happiness optimizer.
Not at all.
At its core, it's a survival machine. It's programmed not to maximize joy or success, but just to keep you alive and safe.
And what's the biggest requirement for safety?
A predictable environment.
Exactly. Our brains despise uncertainty. They hate surprises, especially dangerous ones.
Think back to our evolutionary past. I mean, being exposed to danger is bad enough, but the most vulnerable state you can possibly be in.
Is being exposed to an unpredictable threat.
Right, if a lion jumps out of the tall grass, that's bad. But if you're walking through what you know is lion habitat, your brain is already processing that potential threat.
But if you're suddenly hit by something you never saw coming, a flash flood, a falling tree, that's the highest level of threat.
Hmm.
The brain just cannot allow us to be caught completely flat-footed.
So if the brain detects the potential for a high-stakes, unpredictable, external danger like, say, ultimate rejection or massive public failure, it actually intervenes.
And this intervention is what Dr. Harriet Maitland calls the controlled explosion principle.
A controlled explosion.
That's right. The brain operates on a calculus of harm. It prefers a controlled known threat, that's the self-inflicted harm, over an out-of-control unknown threat.
The external humiliation.
So the controlled explosion is the brain's way of saying, okay, we see a potential catastrophe coming. Let's trigger a smaller, more familiar one right now, one that we can manage and predict.
Yes.
Wait, I need to stop you there because that premise is just wild. Are you seriously saying my brain would rather I fail by my own hand than risk a bigger external failure later?
Yes. Because the goal isn't immediate success.
The goal is protection.
The goal is protection. The brain would rather you be the one who determines the mechanism and timing of the perceived downfall.
So it's about control.
It is. It prefers we be well-rehearsed in receiving that internally created hostility, like the shame of procrastination, than risk being blindsided by an external danger, like the shame of being told you're just not good enough after giving 100% effort.
It's essentially preemptive loss management. Exactly. And this evolutionary threat detection system is, it's highly sensitive. It means our brains are hardwired to spot danger everywhere, even when the threats are purely social or psychological, not, actual predators.
That's the better safe than sorry evolutionary tactic, just applied to everything from deadlines to dating.
Let's look at a real-world scenario. Ghosting.
Okay, ghosting someone in a romantic relationship. Why do people do it, even when they know it hurts the other person and it makes them feel bad about themselves?
Because you are preempting a potential bigger rejection in the future. If you stay fully invested and that person leaves you, the harm feels external, uncontrollable, and deeply shaming. But by ending it now, even clumsily or silently, you maintain control.
You avoid the unknown, bigger hurt, by inflicting a smaller, controlled hurt now? The guilt of being the one who left?
And what about that deadline example we started with?
Why procrastinate on that major project until 10 p.m. the night before it's due?
You are creating an obstacle.
A lack of time. A lack of time, exactly. To avoid the higher stakes, unpredictable harm of public failure, if you fail now, you can just blame the clock. You can say, well, I could have done it if I had the time. That is the controlled explosion.
And that leads us directly into the formal academic framework, right? The one that describes this exact strategy.
Yes, self-handicapping. The transition from that primal defense to this cognitive strategy is, it's pretty seamless.
So that's the survival maneuver. What did the academics call that specific strategy when they saw it in their labs?
Self-handicapping. It was first formalized by Jones and Burgess, and it's a formal cognitive strategy where people actively create obstacles, or they just claim that those obstacles exist, to keep a potential failure from being attributed to, low self-worth or lack of ability.
It's all about protecting self-esteem, especially in competitive settings.
Right.
And I love the psychological maneuvering here. The core goal of the self-handicapper is, it's elegant in its destruction. It lets you externalize failure, but internalize success. Precisely. If you fail, you blame the handicap. I failed because I didn't have enough time. But if, by some miracle, you succeed despite that handicap, say, you pull an all-nighter and still get a B+.
Your credit is enhanced. You were successful and you were fatigued.
It's a win-win for self-protection.
So researchers have identified two main ways people do this, and you'll probably recognize yourself in one of them.
The first is behavioral handicapping. This is where you actively create the obstacle.
This is the student who actually goes out partying the night before the exam instead of studying.
Yes. Or they select impossible goals, or they just refuse to practice a skill they care about deeply, which is really common in sports or the fine arts. The obstacle is real, it's visible.
And the second one is claimed self-handicapping.
This is just merely stating that an obstacle exists.
Right. It's about managing expectations. You walk into the meeting or the test and you immediately say, oh, I got 0 sleep, or I have a migraine, or I didn't have access to the necessary data.
You exaggerate an existing difficulty, so you have a pre-packaged excuse, just ready for failure.
And while the claimed handicapping is used by everyone, the sources do note that males are generally more inclined to use the behavioral self-handicaps.
That's right, the creation of an actual visible obstruction.
Mm-hmm.
And this is often linked to, societal values ascribed to effort and grit.
And that distinction ties right into the second major academic framework we need to talk about, Covington's self-worth theory.
Yes. This is the absolute crux of why we choose guilt over shame.
Okay, so what did Covington find?
Covington showed that individual self-worth is often based on our perceived ability. And in places like school or work, which often function as these zero-sum scoring systems, your success is defined in relation to others.
That competitive dynamic makes the whole concept of effort a psychological minefield.
Exactly. Because this is where effort becomes a double-edged sword.
Right.
If you put in high effort, you study for weeks, you work nights, you try your absolute best, and you still fail, what does that failure suggest?
It suggests a fundamental lack of ability. And that lack of ability is humiliating.
That's the threat.
That's the threat that triggers the brain's controlled explosion. That suggests I am a bad person, a failure. That's shame.
Correct. But if you put in low effort, if you procrastinate, if you choose the controlled explosion and you fail, the result is the feeling of guilt.
Guilt says, I did a bad thing, or I chose poorly.
But crucially, guilt doesn't indict your entire self-worth. It just indicts your strategy or your effort.
So the brain prefers the guilt of low effort over the humiliation and shame of trying hard and failing. Because shame fundamentally threatens the idea of who we are. It makes failure feel like an indictment of our identity.
That's the critical insight. Self-handicapping is really just managing which emotion you experience. Failure isn't the problem. The profound shame about the failure is the threat the brain is trying to dodge.
So by giving yourself an obvious external blame factor, a handicap, you get to experience guilt, which is way less threatening than shame, and you get to maintain the belief that deep down you're actually capable.
Which is a huge shift in perspective. Moving from I'm lazy to my brain is trying to save me from shame.
But this protective strategy, it manifests in really fascinating ways in the modern intellectual world. We have to talk about a very specific form of self-sabotage that affects people like our listeners. who value knowledge and curiosity so highly.
Ah, yes. The trap of over-intellectualizing.
It's a particularly powerful form of self-sabotage because, as you noted, the people who do it are rarely lazy.
No, they're often high-effort types who are extremely sensitive to failure.
They've done the work, right? They've read the books, they've listened to deep dives just like this one, they've developed a sophisticated vocabulary, they can explain exactly what their problem is, where it came from, which childhood dynamic contributed,
And what the optimal conditions for change would be. They build the perfect plan.
but they cannot seem to transition from planning to doing.
And what's so fascinating here is how understanding becomes a substitute for living. At first, insight is useful. It gives language to confusion. But somewhere along the way, thinking starts to feel like progress, even when nothing is actually changing.
The mind will happily help you build a beautiful intellectual house to live in, as long as you never step outside to face the actual weather.
Exactly.
But I don't quite get that. Why is intelligence the vehicle for fear here? Why doesn't all this planning make me less afraid?
Because thinking feels contained. You can control all the variables in your head. Action, on the other hand, is messy. It has real, sometimes irreversible consequences.
So over-intellectualizing disguises fear as intelligence.
That's it. Fear of being seen trying, fear of choosing the wrong path, or maybe the ultimate fear, discovering that all the preparation in the world doesn't actually guarantee a good outcome.
And as long as something stays hypothetical, it can't disappoint you in any concrete way. I know people who have spent years meticulously building a business plan in a spreadsheet.
But they won't file the LLC paperwork.
Exactly. The project remains perfect because it's only a theory.
And the mind just keeps refining, reframing, rehearsing scenarios as if preparation alone could soften the impact of reality. Disappointment is avoided because for the over-intellectualizer, disappointment feels personal. It feels like final, definitive evidence of failure.
The irony is that real change is, well, it's far less elegant than the theories we build around it. It's clumsy.
It's often small. It rarely feels ready.
And over-intellectualizing just resists this messiness because it demands clarity before commitment and certainty before effort.
And there's that identity component again. If you pride yourself on being the person who understands things deeply, the one who sees all the nuance moving into blunt, imperfect action, can feel like you're betraying that identity.
You collapse all that beautiful complexity into just one direction. And suddenly, you're not the smart, cautious person considering all the options anymore.
You're just the person who chose option A, and option A might fail.
So, the path to engagement requires abandoning the comfort of that beautifully furnished waiting room. The opposite of that half-hearted, protected effort is full engagement. It's going all in.
And this isn't just about working harder. It's about the quality of your attention. The sources reference the concept of joie de vivre, that exuberance that comes from full engagement, and the Japanese concept of ichigyozumai.
Which means?
It means full concentration, to burn yourself completely, like a good bonfire. It means being fully present in whatever the task is.
The Romans put it even more succinctly, didn't they, with the phrase, age quod aegis.
Do what you are doing.
Be fully where you are, and that's the key distinction.
Going all in doesn't deplete you. It actually generates energy. It's the half-hearted efforts, the ones driven by fear and protection that just exhaust us.
Because they trap us in that liminal state, right?
Yeah.
Never truly engaged enough to find flow, but never disengaged enough to actually rest.
Quality of attention beats quantity of effort. Every time.
So let's synthesize our findings. We learned today that self-sabotage is really a protective shield. It's rooted in deep survival instincts, and it's designed to manage external threat and protect our self-worth from shame.
But the severe downside, and this is critical, is that this protective shield inevitably becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. If we create an obstacle, if we don't try our best because we're afraid of the result, we end up performing worse than we would have otherwise.
Our fear of failure stood in the way of the very success that would have erased that fear.
And the long-term costs are significant. Research consistently shows self-handicapping is negatively associated with persistence and performance, and it leads to worse health, negative moods, and higher use of substances over time.
We just can't afford to let these protective mechanisms continue controlling and dictating our lives. The crucial pivot, it turns out, isn't finding a better explanation for the problem. It's not one more book or one more layer of intellectual analysis.
No. The sources suggest that clarity and confidence are actually side effects of movement, not prerequisites for starting.
You have to move first, and only then do you gain the clear context needed for understanding what happened.
So our final provocative thought for you is this. Identify one area where you are currently living in that beautifully furnished waiting room of over-intellectualization.
Where's the theory perfect, but the action just non-existent?
Choose one action, no matter how small, specific, or beneath your current intelligence it feels, and let the action teach you what thinking never could. Move first, then analyze.